How's that knee working for you? Oh, good.
I'm going to get your stuff, your purse is on there, so I'm going to pick it up for you, okay? So I'm just letting you know that I'm picking it up. I would sit either here or there since it's going to be that way. That way you're looking at us, so.
They say this is good.
Yeah. Mr. Scott. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and I want to thank you all for coming. This is a great crowd. You're people from all over. We want to talk about a couple of things today, and it's really important that people understand what is happening. My name is Barry Gold, and I'm the Director of Government Relations for AARP Nevada. AARP Nevada, the state office, covers the entire state, and we go over the entire state doing presentations like this and talking to people. What I will tell you is in the state of Nevada, there are 348,000 members across the state, and we like to make sure that we get to all the different places so we can talk to all of them. But what I want to talk to you about now is something that's happening right now. Be the difference, vote. I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is it's an election year. The bad news is it's an election year. So you're going to be hearing lots of stuff, you're going to be seeing lots of commercials, and you're going to be seeing a lot of different things. But what we want to talk to you about is the importance of how you can make a difference and how you can be the difference and make a difference. So AARP has over a 30-year history of voter engagement. What we do is we reach out to the general public and our members, and we really try to get them excited about what's happening so they get out and vote. It's not voter education. We don't educate people on what to vote or how to vote. It's just an idea to engage them that it's really important. So our campaign this year is called Be the Difference, Vote. And so what I want to talk to you about right now is the value of the 50-plus voter. We all know that older adults vote more than anyone else, right? We are the inveterate voter. We're the ones who get out and vote all the time. But if you look at these numbers right here, in 2016, a presidential election, over 90% across the country of the 50-plus voters went out and voted in 2016. But if you look, in 2014, that dropped to only 75%. And you know what? That really isn't good enough. That's a big problem because people need to get out and vote. And the candidates know sometimes midterm elections, people don't go vote, doesn't matter. Well, it does matter because you can be the difference if you get out and vote. Now let's look at Nevada. Let's look at what Nevada did. In 2016, the presidential election, over 600,000 Nevadans, 50-plus, went out and voted. If you go back to 2014, over 200,000, one-third of them did not vote. So only 415, that's terrible. So what it tells you is this: we have an opportunity to elect our elected officials every 2 years. However, some people wait every 4 years, and that simply isn't good enough. We have an obligation, it's our civic duty to get out and vote. So let's talk about the Nevada primary that just happened in June. These are numbers from the Secretary of State's website. In Nevada, there's 1,442,000 active registered voters. As of the primary, that's how many are. But look how many people voted, only 287,000. That's horrible. According to the Secretary of State's website, that's 19.91%. Only 20% of people voted in the primary. And for those of you who follow politics, some of you know a lot of elections get decided in the primary. So people really need to get out and vote when they have the opportunity to. As a comparison, there's 348,000 AARP members across the state. One of the things I'm fortunate enough that I get to do is I get to go to Carson City and I get to talk to our elected officials. I know John Ellison very well and worked with him very closely. And what I say is, on behalf of the 347,000 AARP members across the state, we urge you to whatever. No one else has a constituency that large, and it's important that they know that we all vote whenever we have an opportunity to. So what are the issues that matters to 50 plus? How are we going to reach out and let the candidates know what we want them to do? Well, there's Medicare, caregiving, Social Security, prescription drugs at the federal level, and AARP, as you know, works at the federal level. Now, when I look at this crowd and I look who's here, I see one, maybe two of you who are old enough to be AARP members. The rest of you are going to have to wait a few years, right? You can laugh, it's okay. Some of the jokes are stale, but I still keep saying them. So those are the federal issues. On a state level, what's going to happen to the future of Medicaid? What's going to happen with utilities? AARP is really, really into caregiving. We really like to help people with caregiving. We have resources, a lot of things. A lot of people become caregivers. It's what makes us human. We help each other. And the last one is savings. We have a unique thing that we're going to be running next session that's going to help employees who don't have a way to save through their jobs, that they may have a way to do that, similar to the College 529 plans where you can save for college for your kids through payroll deductions, and it costs the employers nothing. Over half of the people in our state, employees, have no way to save for retirement through their jobs. They don't have pensions, they don't have automatic 401ks or anything like that. So there's a way that we can have a state facilitated, not a state sponsored or a state run program, where all these people can start doing that. People are 15 times more likely to save for retirement if they can do it through their job and their payroll deduction. And it costs the employers, the businesses, nothing. And it's a great way to do that, so that way when people retire, they have means instead of needs. So those are some of the things that we're looking at a federal and state level. So let's look at these. What are the key AARP issues? Medicare. We all want to make sure Medicare stays strong and provides affordable health care for 60 million seniors. Not only affordable, but access. Access is a big issue. And I know out here in the rurals, access to health care is a big issue for a lot of people. Keeping Social Security viable for future and current generations. What are we going to do to make sure that Social Security stays around so it's going to help people? Because again, with the economy like it is, a lot of people aren't able to save for the future, so we need to make sure it's there. Prescription drugs. No one should have to choose between food and medicine. That's just wrong. Caregiving families need better support. Medicaid should continue to help the most vulnerable in our state. And utilities, we need to make sure people are protected from predatory marketing practices and from really large rate hikes. So let's talk about utilities as a state issue. That is something I really want to talk a lot about. We talked about be the difference and vote, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but we really want to move on to ballot question 3. What I'm going to is all of you at your table, first of all, the presentation that we're doing, and I just walked off camera, and my guy over there is wondering why I did that. This is the presentation that I'm using right now, so you can look at this and follow along or write notes or take it home with you or use it as a napkin. I don't care. But it's there for you to use. It's there for you to do whatever you want with, and there's information there for you. So the other thing I want to tell you that's in the middle of your table is this pledge. And what this is it's the AARP Be the Difference Voter Pledge. And we're going to talk about it a little bit later. This doesn't say who you're going to vote for. This just says, I'm going to be the difference. I'm going to get out and vote. I'm going to vote in this election. I'm going to make sure my voice is heard. And for everybody who fills out one of our voter pledges, and again, it doesn't say who you're going to vote for, we have a coaster with a bottle opener in it. So that's something to consider. They're in the middle of your table if you'd like to do that, and we'll talk a little more about that a little bit later. But let's talk about utilities, because there's something happening that everyone needs to know about. And that's ballot question 3. Who's heard of ballot question 3? Pretty much everybody? Well, there's some people that haven't heard about it and they don't quite understand what it is. Ballot question 3 is energy deregulation, pure and simple. You can call it restructuring, you can call it deregulation, you can call it anything you want. It's energy deregulation. It will fundamentally change the way you buy electricity in our state and who you buy it from. And the problem is, it's in the Nevada Constitution. It is a constitutional amendment. That is a huge problem. Constitutional amendments change everything. No other state that has deregulated their electricity market has done it through a constitutional amendment. If it passes with a constitutional amendment, it would take at least 4 years to repeal and undo the damage that question 3 will cause. the head of the Public Utilities Commission was quoted as saying, "It will leave a very big scar in our state if this passes." Now, I'm going to talk about the Public Utilities Commission a little bit later in a report that they did, but you need to know that Nevada considered deregulating their electricity market in 1997 and 1999, and they said, no, this isn't going to work, because they looked at what happened in California, they looked at what happened in Texas, and it just doesn't work. It's not reliable, prices go up, predatory sales things happen, and I'm going to let Thad talk about in just a second what's in the rurals, because you have a special situation. As bad as ballot question 3 is for the rest of the state, for the rurals, it is so much worse, and he's going to tell you a lot about that. So he's going to tell you a little bit about that right now.
Sorry, I missed my cue there, Barry.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
I'm sorry.
I'm so pleased to be able to be part of this activity with AARP. We did a radio show this morning with Lori Gilbert. That will air the 22nd or 23rd.
Something like that.
And we encourage you to listen to that. We've been providing a lot of information for several months now. I've had the privilege of addressing many of you at our local senior centers, and I appreciate you coming this evening. Did I get it yet?
Okay. We are live streaming this on Facebook, so if your friends on Facebook, tell them to listen.
So, it's brand new. It's kind of a bucket list thing for me. I've never live streamed, so good deal tonight. If passed, question 3 would deregulate Nevada's electric utility industry. And as Barry mentioned, this is something that we've considered before. In '99, we were just about to pull the trigger on deregulation, and the California energy market collapsed, and it took the rest of the electric utility industry with it. Governor Gwynn was governor at the time, and he looked at that scenario and thought, there is no win for this in Nevada. This is going to hurt everyone in Nevada. And so he used his executive authority to suspend deregulation. And so we've been on hold since that time. Interestingly, no other state has attempted deregulation since, because it hasn't worked very well where it has been implemented. So, and to do it through a constitutional amendment, we would be the only ones ever to attempt that. Nevada's average rates are already well below the average, 30% below states that have deregulated. And traditional electric companies will be forced to divest their assets. So for Wellsville Electric, for instance, we have an all requirements contract with Bonneville Power Administration that runs through 2028. Question 3 requires that deregulation be implemented by July 1, 2023. So we will have 5 years left on a contract that's take or pay. So if we use the electricity, we pay for it, but if we don't, we still pay for it. And that cost will end up being a burden on the rest of all of the consumers. And NV Energy and all the other utilities around the state will be in that same boat. We're going to be stuck with either generation assets that we own or long-term contracts that we are obligated to. And the proponents have suggested, oh, you just abrogate and you get out of those contracts. Well, federal government doesn't abrogate contracts. We're not getting out of our contract, and we don't want to, because it's the access to some of the most affordable electricity in the nation, and we're able to share that with our consumers, and all of the state benefits from that. Dismantling it in that way is estimated, they're being conservative on the slide, saying it's $4 billion. I've seen estimates as high as $7 billion, and that's just for the stranded assets. So prorate that over all the consumers in the state. How much does that raise your bill every month to have to pay off an additional $7 billion that nobody was planning on? The Public Utilities Commission did 10 days of hearings. And if you've never ever had a chance to sit through Public Utilities Commission hearings, you really should do a 10-day stretch in February. It's a great opportunity. But it was fascinating to see the proponents, what they would say and what they wouldn't say. So at one point, and it was an open forum, anybody could get up and offer any testimony that they wanted to. And there were advocates for question 3, and there were opponents for question 3. And there were folks there who were just consumers, and they wanted to know what was going on, and they had some questions. And at one point during the hearing, Chairman Joe Reynolds said, is anybody willing to go on the record and say that question 3 will save consumers money? And it's dead silence in the room. And it's being live streamed to Las Vegas, and he says, oh, you in Las Vegas, is there anybody in Las Vegas who wants to say this will save consumers money? Again, dead silence. Nobody wants to make that guarantee. So the advertising is full of all these rosy promises of what will happen, but if they're on the official record, nobody wants to say this will save you money. They estimated also that it would cost $100 million to start the process and $45 million annually to maintain. So if you live in Houston, Texas, Texas is often given as an example of where deregulation works really well. If you live in Houston, you can punch in your zip code and you can get up to 260 offers for options to purchase electricity. There's like the free nights and weekends plan, and there's the 5-cent plan, and there's the 25-cent plan. And you can sign up for a package that starts out at a great rate, but a typical consumer uses 1,000 kilowatt hours a month. If you go over that, though, you end up in the penalty rate, which might be 20 cents a kilowatt hour. And so you can rack up enormous bills really quickly. And then when you get into the fine print of the contract you signed, that contract automatically renews unless you issue a notice to cancel within a very specific time frame. And so people end up stuck in these long-term contracts. We think it will really decimate rooftop solar in the state. There are about 45,000 customers in Nevada who have made a huge investment to install rooftop solar to help them manage their long-term power costs. The reason that that works is you have an incumbent utility that buys everything that you don't use and provides everything that you don't generate yourself. So if you don't have that backstop of an incumbent utility to do that, the system doesn't work very well. So consider it in these terms. If you're generating and you need to sell that into the market, but all the providers out there, their only goal is to sell at a profit, who's going to want you as a customer? Because you don't use enough and you don't buy enough, and what you sell is at a higher cost than what I can buy and resell. So that's going to cause some pain and anguish there, and there'll be a big transition within the industry. We don't know how that will affect every utility, but we're expecting some significant job losses, especially in the generation and transmission side of the business. There's a little table that shows a rate comparison across the nation. So most of these are the New England states and a few in the Pennsylvania, Illinois neck of the woods. They have had deregulation since the mid-90s. And you'll notice that Connecticut is the highest at 17.24 cents, and Nevada's down here at 8.38 cents. So Connecticut's a little bit more than double what we are. And so the advocates are saying, well, if you approve question 3 and you'll get a better deal on electricity, it's like, well, all those folks in the 18 states that have deregulated don't seem to be getting much of a deal. We got a lot better deal here, so why would we sign up for that? So we're about 17% below the national average. And another big challenge that we have in Nevada is Nevada doesn't have a wholesale energy market. All the utilities in the state use what we call bilateral contracts. The utility has a contract with a generator or with a solar plant or somebody to provide that electricity. And it's just a two-way deal. We have a contract in place. So you can't just go out and buy it. So a retailer, this would be like trying to set up a lemonade stand, but there's nobody to sell you sugar, right? Okay. Nevada's, Nevada's consumer rates, average customer rates, have gone down 15% since 2009. Now, I know it doesn't feel like that when the price of everything is going up, but NV Energy's rates have gone down, and the state rates overall have gone down, and that's primarily driven by the abundance of natural gas, which is really what's driving the cost of electricity nationwide. Go ahead. So Massachusetts is my favorite poster child for how this is supposed to work. So their Attorney General's office has a consumer protection division, and they've received a lot of complaints about these predatory contracting practices and marketing practices. And it got to be such a big deal that they decided to do a study to see how big the problem really was. Because, you know, when you just get phone calls, you don't know, you know, am I just seeing the tip of the iceberg, or is this just a few people who are unhappy? So they commissioned a study, and they found that Massachusetts customers paid $176 million more over a 2-year period than they would have had they stayed with their traditional utility structure. And the predatory practices have been so bad, and the bait and switch tactics have been such a problem, that their Attorney General is asking their legislature to go back to the traditional regulated utility structure. Texas is often held up as an example of how this works so great. And to their credit, it's worked better there than most places. But Texas is kind of, you know, they always say things are bigger in Texas. Well, it is bigger in Texas. Texas is the only state that has an independent electricity grid. They're not really connected to any of the neighboring states. And so they can do stuff in Texas that doesn't necessarily work everywhere else. But in the early 90s, the utilities planned for a long time in the future, because it takes a long time to plan, permit, finance, and build a power plant. So through the early 90s, Texas was growing, and they decided, well, we're going to need a lot of power plants to supply this. So they built quite a bit. And so they were kind of ahead. And then with changes in technology and energy efficiency, demand hasn't grown as fast as we expected. So from the 90s until about this year, Texas has been living off of the surplus that they had built, that they had invested in back in the 90s. Well, that kind of came to a screeching halt this year, because the growth in Texas finally caught up to where they had capacity. They've reached the end of all those generation units that they built back in the day. And so consumer complaints have spiked there. There was a headline in the Houston Chronicle that said, if you go on the website and compare rates, those great rates that were available just a couple of months ago are gone. And you can expect to pay much higher prices for contracts going forward. And you can expect rolling blackouts and other kinds of problems like that through the summer. To put that in a local context, there's a big substation down by Ely called Gonder. And it's an interconnect point between the Nevada grid and Utah, Arizona, and Montana, coming down through Utah. Well, to think of a power line like a pipe. And if you want to get your electricity through that pipe, you have to rent the little portion that your electricity goes through. And we could refer to that as demand. Wellsboro Electric Company pays $3.38 a kilowatt for demand right now. Over several weeks during the early part of the summer, demand at Gonder substation was $990. 300 times what the going rate should be, because of those rolling blackouts that they're dealing with in Southern California, and they're trying to get capacity through Nevada into California to solve some of those issues down there. But when you start leaving the world of long-term contracts, where you have guaranteed prices and guaranteed supply, and you start into these marketing schemes like that, you end up with that kind of volatility in the market. So think how much you would have to save over the whole rest of the year to make up for $9.90 a couple of peak weeks in the summer. Go ahead. So we think the big reasons to vote no on question 3 are it locks a risky and expensive experiment into the Constitution. As I said before, Nevada would be the only state ever to attempt this through a constitutional amendment. And it really handcuffs the legislature in trying to deal with this. When the proponents speak about this, they say, all these problems can be solved in the legislature. And a few of you have had a chance to go to the legislature and visit with our legislators. There's an old joke that our legislature meets every other year for 120 days. And boy, wouldn't it be wonderful if they only met every 120 years for a couple of days. But really, they are working hard. They're citizens like us. They leave their homes and their jobs, and they go down there for 120 days every other year. And over the last 3 sessions, they have typically dealt with about 1,000. The average has been 1,060 bills that they try to deal with in that 120 days. Another part of the PUC report that Barry mentioned went through all of Nevada's existing laws, and they estimated that there are about 2,000 that would have to change to accommodate the passage of question 3. So the legislature would really be being handed 2 full years worth of work to try to do in that time frame. And if they focus on that to meet that constitutional deadline, they're going to have to put everything else on the back burner. Education, Medicare, senior issues, law enforcement, all water issues, all the other issues that the legislature deals with typically are going to get sidelined so that we can meet this arbitrary deadline in this. And as much as we can probably preserve our interest in the legislature, these decisions are really going to end up in the courts. Wells Roll is in a unique situation. Well, not unique. There are several other utilities that are in this boat. Wells Roll also serves into Utah. Raft River serves from Idaho down into northern Elko County. Harney Electric in Oregon serves most of Humboldt County, almost to Winnemucca out of Oregon. Surprise Valley and Pluma Sierra serve into Nevada from California. So if you have a consumer in Idaho who has an account in Nevada, does that constitutional amendment apply to them? And if it does, how does that affect the rest of the consumers in that utility? And if I'm a consumer in Idaho and the Nevada half of my utility is being negatively affected, do I now have a legal claim against Nevada? And do we suddenly no longer have these in local courts or district courts or even at the Nevada Supreme Court? Are we suddenly in federal court because we've crossed state lines with these kinds of issues? So we think it will cost taxpayers billions. The estimate's anywhere from 4 to 7. And that really depends on what the auction's like on the day they have to sell those assets. This would be the only time that utilities have been deregulated with a date certain deadline. So there won't be any negotiating the price. There's going to be an auction. And who knows what the auction's going to be on that particular day. So depending on what those assets sell for, and then you subtract that from the book value of all those assets, and we're going to end up stuck with the bill. And it threatens the renewable energy future. People love to criticize Warren Buffett because he has so much money. Fair enough. But Berkshire Hathaway, which Warren Buffett is a major shareholder of, owns NV Energy. And they have pledged $2 billion to invest in renewable energy in the state of Nevada. So if you want to build a power plant, you've got to know who your customers are going to be. Otherwise, nobody's going to finance it, because if you don't have a known market, nobody's going to want to invest in the power plant that you want to build. But if you have a big company like Berkshire Hathaway as your consumer, everybody in the world wants to finance that. That's a great bet, right? So if we lose Berkshire Hathaway as a partner in all of this, it really jeopardizes the long-term development of renewable energy in the state of Nevada, because you don't have that financial backstop that guarantees repayment. And that goes through to rooftop solar and even smaller projects like that. So for all of those reasons and a whole lot more that we don't have time to discuss but would love to, we're urging everyone to vote no on question 3. And I really appreciate your help, Barry.
Absolutely, thank you. I want to add a couple more things that he had mentioned. He had mentioned that if the generation goes away, and if all of a sudden they have to sell their assets and sell their generation capacities, well, where are we going to get the electricity from? Well, the only really alternative we have is the California system. It's called the California Independent System Operators, or the CAL-ISO. Well, they could probably sell us electricity, but the problem is the Board of Governance, the people who decide the policy on what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, they're all appointed by the governor of California. So if we join them, what we're doing is we are subjugating our energy policy to the state of California. Does anybody want to do that? I don't think that's a very good idea. So that's another big problem. And the other big problem is the predatory sales stuff. He had mentioned the 2 reports, and I happened to bring them. This is the PUC report. This is a 106-page report. If anybody hasn't read this, if you have a really, really sleepless night, go ahead and try this. However, on your tables, what we handed out to you in the packet, page 6 from the PUC report is the key findings. So this is page 6 from that 106-page report. Now, I'm not going to read these, but if you go through and you read these and you go down one at a time, it gets worse and worse and worse as you read it. So that tells you this is really a problem. The PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, is an independent regulatory body. If this passes and goes through, they will lose control over regulating a lot of the things that we talked about. And that's a problem because they're some of the ones that help keep rates lower. The other report I have is the Massachusetts Attorney General's report. I don't know how many pages it is, but it has graphs and maps and all that kind of stuff, again, for another sleepless night. But what the Attorney General in the state of Massachusetts said is this doesn't work in our state for residential ratepayers. For people who live in houses and apartments, it doesn't work. They end up paying more, and they're getting ripped off by all the salespeople. So I want to tell you a little personal story of how I learned about this. I was selected by the governor to serve on the governor's what's called the Energy Choice Committee for the last year to represent seniors since I worked for AARP. So I sat and I heard all these presentations and all this testimony, and I heard lots of things. And the more that I learned this is really bad for our state. This is really bad for residential ratepayers. And if you look at who's opposed to this, has anybody seen the No on 3 commercials? If you see the No on 3 commercials, you'll see it's AARP's opposed to this. The firefighters are opposed to this. The police is opposed to this. Labor unions are opposed to this. The Mining Association just came out as opposed to this. So you look at this broad group of people who are opposed to this and saying this just is not going to work. This is going to negatively affect our state in a lot of ways. Now, what I want to tell you, we talked about voting before. your vote on ballot question 3 is one of the most important and long-lasting votes that you can do, because for some of the candidates you're going to vote for some state offices, we have term limits. In 12 years, they're out, right? You can only serve for 12 years. If this passes, it's going to change our Constitution, and it's going to be there forever. And that's a real issue and something we really need to think about. So when you think about ballot question 3, think about who's opposed to it and who supports it. If you look at who supports it, I encourage everybody to go to the noon3.com, the coalition website. Anybody can join the coalition. You don't have to be a big union or AARP or somebody else. Anybody, individuals can join that, and it's a big groundswell of who's joining that, and it's real important. I see you brought some information. There's buttons and pins. I've heard those signs are all over Wells now, and that's really exciting to hear.
We'll take more.
So when I go around and we talk about this, frequently someone raises their hand, and they say, I lived in California, I lived in Connecticut, I lived in Ohio, and I lived through it, and it was terrible. I've never heard anybody talk to me that say, it wasn't so bad, I thought it was great. I take a step back and I let them talk, and they tell their personal story, and they say why this didn't work for them in their state. And that's pretty important. The other thing that they find is the predatory sales techniques, is they do slamming and cramming. So you have these 10 or 20 or 30 little, I don't even want to call them electric companies, they're not, they're retailers. And what they do is they come in, they talk to you, and they knock on your door, or they call you on the phone, and they say, have I got a deal for you? I'm going to sell you electricity for this many cents per kilowatt hour. And you say, oh, that sounds pretty good. But what they don't tell you is after 60 days, it doubles. Or, oh, by the way, there's a disenrollment fee of $500, so you're stuck. So there's a lot of these predatory things that happen. One of the recommendations that AARP that I had to make at the Governor's Energy Choice Committee, which was an official recommendation that's in the final report, is to outlaw door-to-door sales and telephone solicitation. Imagine that. It was so bad in other states, they had to kind of stop that. The state of Connecticut, for example, they have to send you a letter within 48 hours telling you that they switched your provider because people were getting switched without their knowledge. They'd come and talk to you and say, have I got a deal for you? And you go, let me think about it. And they go ahead and switch you anyway. Well, that shouldn't happen, and that's why they had to have that regulation saying that they're going to let you know that that happened. So there's a lot of things happening, and one of the things that the Energy Choice Committee talked about was a robust education campaign if it should pass. What I said is, oh, no, 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 no. We need a robust education campaign before the election so people really know what they're voting for. They need to know what the effects of this is going to be and how it's going to affect you. And that's why we're really pleased to join with different organizations. I have talked now with an electric company. We have met with the firefighters. I've met with the union. We've done a lot of these presentations with lots of groups to let people know. And once you talk to people, and once they get better understanding, they say, okay, I kind of understand what this is about. So as we mentioned, it's really important. AARP, join the coalition. We are a formal part of the coalition. If you go up there, there's a quote from Maria Dent, who's our state director. I want to introduce, there's Michael Moore, who's a volunteer. Maria Dent is our state director, and the guy over there with all the technical stuff is Scott Gulbranson. He's our communications director. And it's really important. We decided it was so important that we needed to join that coalition, not just for our 347,000 members, but for everyone in the state to hear what a problem this is going to be. So we've talked about ballot question 3 and how it's really bad. But let's get back to talking about voting. Here's the pledge that's on your table. And the pledge doesn't say who you're going to vote for. It just says, I pledge to be the difference and vote in this election. Every vote counts, and together we the people can hold politicians accountable and make them pay attention to important issues like Medicare, Social Security, prescription drugs, caregiving, and financial security. So we're hoping everybody, if you want to fill out that pledge, we have a coaster for you. You can also go to our website, aarp.org, vote, and there's a lot of information on a lot of the stuff we talked about. Not ballot question 3. If you want to know about that, go to noon3.com. A lot of information on that, so you can learn a lot of different things. So we're reaching out into the community, really telling everybody that all of you have a chance to be the difference. And the way that you be the difference is by voting. So I want to thank everybody for coming here today. Success, what does it look like? When this is all over, when it's the day after the election, and yes, I am waiting for the day after the election, because like I said, it's good news and bad news. Boost the voter turnout. We need people, we need the 50 plus. We need everybody to get out and vote. We need everybody to get out and vote. Our issues are front and center. Candidates are on record addressing our issues, and ballot question 3 is defeated. That'll be a very good day for Nevada. So I want to thank everybody for coming today. We're here. We're going to answer questions. If you have any questions, we'd love to talk to you. As Thad said, we're on the morning show with Lori Gilbert, and it's going to show either the 22nd or the 23rd, something like that. So we encourage everybody to get out and vote. Vote no on ballot question 3, and the rest of it is up for you to make the best decision for who you want to vote for, what candidates you want to vote for, because this is America, and that's what it's all about. That's what it's about. So anyway, thank you so much. If there's any questions, we would be glad to answer them. Not all at once. Okay.
The way I'm understanding this, if Proposition 3 goes through, then our electricity is going to be up for bid. People can bid for the highest price to take our electricity from us and resell it.
Everything changes. The way it's set up right now, everything changes. In some parts of the state where NV Energy is a provider, they generate, they distribute, and they sell to you. Well, constitutional amendment, that all goes away, and you know what? We don't know what's going to happen, as Thad said, because a constitutional amendment supersedes everything. So everything disappears and goes away, and we don't know what it's going to be. Ballot question 3, the language is kind of unclear. It's a statement. It says you can buy electricity from anyone you choose, and it'll be cheaper. But there's no plan. It doesn't say how it's going to happen. And in listening and what I learned, and what I've talked to lots of legislators, they say there's no way we can get that done. Plus, it's not going to work. In other states, it doesn't work. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, next year, the biggest coal-fired power plant in the West, Page, Arizona, is going to shut down. That's NV Energy. Now, if that shuts down, it's going to put a shortfall of electricity in the state of Arizona, Las Vegas, and other parts of Nevada. If this passes, then that means NV Energy could take our power and sell it back to us at a higher rate to cover their shortfall.
NV Energy has said they will not be in the generation business at all. They will not sell it. The only thing NV Energy is going to do if this passes is they already own the wires. So they will be in the distribution. They said, we're not going to generate anymore. We're going to get rid of all of our power plants. And there's going to be an auction, and they're going to sell them for a great big loss. And when they sell it for a great big loss, and when Wells has their power purchase that they have to get rid of, who's going to pay for that ultimately? All of us. It's been estimated that every Nevada resident, or every Nevada ratepayer, residential ratepayer, will pay approximately $28 a month administration fee to just pay for the change, on top of anything they use. Who wants to add $28 to their electric bill just to change it? The other thing is, it says you can buy it from anybody you want to. But in some local places, some local in the rurals, you're not going to have a lot of choices because people are going to say, I don't want to sell electricity up here. I can't make any money. Down in Las Vegas, they're going to crop up like cable companies. There's going to be 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 of them, and you're going to have these crazy choices to make. My colleague in Connecticut told me that they tell people, don't you dare talk to anyone on the phone or that talks to you in person or knocks on your door. There's an official rate board where the 44 choices are, and that's the only way you're not going to get ripped off, but you're still going to get ripped off because you're going to pay more. So this is just a lot of unknowns. We just don't know what is going to happen. And as Thad said, this is going to end up in the courts if it passes. Best case scenario, the people speak and they say, we don't want this. We don't really need this. The energy groups, the renewable energy groups, just came out against it. They understand that ballot question 3 will jeopardize the renewable future. It's going to do a lot of things, and that's one of the big ones, so they've against it. So you think about it, we have the rural co-ops who reached out to AARP and said, you've got to come up here. We have to tell people. They have to know what this is going to do. And so we're up here doing this, as well as the firefighters, the police, all these different groups, large groups are saying this is bad for our state. Any other questions? It's got to be one, come on. It's got to be at least one.
Well, I don't have a question, but you know, that's true, like if you hadn't explained it to us tonight, and just read it on the ballot, I have to sometimes reread them and I still don't get what I'm voting for. I don't know if I just marked something, you know, and so I'm glad that we have this, and I will tell all my friends that don't know everyone.
Well, thank you so much. That's what we really need. This has to be word of mouth. We have to have people say what this is really going to do and what this is not going to do. The promise that the yes side is saying is, oh, you'll have all this choice, and because you have this choice, it'll be cheaper. The electricity market doesn't work that way. It really doesn't work that way, and we don't want to find out. We don't want to be in that situation where we find out. It will take at least 6 years to undo such a mess, and there's no way. I go to the legislature a lot, and there's no way they can get this done by July 1st, 2023. And the other thing I'll tell you is there's not enough sitting legislators anymore that have enough really good expertise in energy and electricity. Some of those termed out, the Randolph Townsends, and some of those people that really understood electricity are gone. So there's very few of them, and it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess. So anyway, thank you all so much. We're so glad that you are here. Tell all your friends and neighbors what they need to do. If you turn in your pledge, Maria over there has a coaster for you, and we'd love to see you. And if you want to hang around and talk to us for a while, we'll be here. So thank you all so much, and we appreciate you all coming out. We hope you enjoy dinner, and thank you.
We have signs and buttons and
Yep.
bumper magnets and all kinds of swag to help. If you want to go someplace fast, take your button off. If you want to have conversations about this, wear your button.